Let's talk problems and propose solutions. The growing problem of crime on public transportation, that's this man's problem now. A candidate for governor says her solution to climate change is producing more fossil fuels in Colorado. Aurora's plan to make life harder for people on the streets involves sharp, jagged rocks. Whether a national plan to get more people in electric vehicles might backfire for a while. And the kidnapped cat, the kind of famous one from the hardware store, found. We've got problems, both big and small, and solutions, both real and bonkers, on Next. RTD's new police chief will have to deal with an increasing crime problem. Perhaps Dr. Joel Fitzgerald will use the element of surprise, as RTD did today, keeping the new police chief's name a mystery until his swearing in. That fended off any public feedback or pesky journalists doing research about his past ahead of time. Our Steve Stager outlines what we've learned about the new RTD police chief and his plan to make public transportation safer.
Dr. Joel Fitzgerald's path to this stage has been by no means smooth. The first black police chief in predominantly white Waterloo, Iowa, he faced tremendous outside opposition for changes he made, including the removal of a griffin from the department logo that resembled a KKK dragon. In 2019, he was fired as Fort Worth police chief for what the city manager at the time called poor judgment. Fitzgerald sued Fort Worth, claiming he was in the process of exposing corruption in City Hall to the FBI, and was fired the day he was set to meet with them.
The one thing that I expect out of every police officer is to demonstrate integrity, even when no one's looking. And as the chief of police, you can count on me doing the right thing when no one's looking, and that was evident in Fort Worth.
Here in Denver, Fitzgerald inherits a small department in charge of a huge transit agency. RTD has spent the last year or so dealing with a very public safety problem. CEO Deborah Johnson seems relieved to have some fresh eyes on it.
My priority, he needs to become the face of this issue and not me. We alone can't deal with the issue that's problematic here in society, right? The antisocial behaviors. It's going to take all hands on deck.
Johnson praised Fitzgerald for his approach, which she calls firm compassion.
I'm not going to criminalize or over-criminalize people that are mentally ill or drug addicts, but we have laws in place for a reason, and the riders need to feel safe and secure.
The chief says that will start by making his officers and other contract security more visible.
They want to see us. They don't want to just see us in cars or riding around from station to station. They want to see us on trains. They want to see our security personnel on trains.
RTD's police force, pretty small right now, 21 sworn officers at this time. For years, they have relied on contract security from the company Allied Universal to kind of backfill some of those security officers on trains. But there's been a push in recent years to get rid of some of those contracted positions with more sworn police officers, and that is the process that Fitzgerald will likely oversee, Kyle.
And so much of this, Steve, has to do with Denver police and their actions in and around Union Station where you're standing, because when Denver police make changes in how they deal with populations surrounding Union Station, that pushes issues in and out there.
It pushes issues onto the train. It pushes issues to different parts of RTD's jurisdiction. RTD police do work with police in Denver. They work with police in Aurora. They work with police in Lakewood. Anywhere where they operate their system, their hope is to be a whole lot more visible, and they hope that that will help alleviate some of the issues that people are seeing on trains and buses right now.
Steve Stager, who found a great way to make the train early on his way home tonight. Steve, thank you. Democrats lead in Colorado's races for governor and Senate, up in the polls, according to the pollster whose work admittedly leans conservative. Trafalgar is kind of an unusual outfit in that they adjust their polling based on their belief that conservatives are less likely to be honest with pollsters about their views. So it meant that this outfit, Trafalgar, correctly pointed to Donald Trump's win in 2016, but they missed in 2020 when they thought that Trump would be reelected. Here's what they're showing in Colorado right now. Poll results out today put the Senate race at a 5 to 6 point advantage for Democratic Senator Michael Bennet. That's in line with the general consensus that Bennet is favored, but the race is certainly not out of reach for Republican Joe O'Dea. More surprising is that Trafalgar polled the race for governor as being even closer. A 4.5 point edge for Democratic Governor Jared Polis over Republican Heidi Ganahl. That would defy all conventional wisdom about where that race stands today. We reached out to Trafalgar asking for their crosstabs. Basically, those are the internals of a poll that show how it was conducted. Pollsters will commonly release those for the sake of transparency. In this case, we haven't heard back. Climate change is a tricky topic for the Republican candidates for Senate and governor in Colorado. They often hedge on even acknowledging the scientific consensus that human activity is changing our climate. The issue was inescapable today when they spoke at the Colorado Water Congress conference up in Steamboat Springs. Now, there was broad agreement from both the Republicans and the Democratic governor and senator they seek to replace that Colorado should get to keep its currently allotted amount of Colorado River water. The federal government says all the states that use Colorado River water need to make dramatic cuts to protect critical reservoirs. Last week, the states missed a deadline to make the cuts themselves, so now it's up to the feds. Again, all four candidates for governor and Senate agreed that Colorado should not be the state making cuts. Climate scientists, of course, agree that human-caused climate change is contributing to the West's worst drought in centuries. Today, though, neither Republican candidate acknowledged that the burning of fossil fuels is driving our global warming. Here's Senate candidate Joe O'Dea, who has previously denied the science on this.
And there is no doubt that the climate is getting warmer and drier. Layer onto that rapidly growing populations in Colorado, and what you get is one hell of a public policy dilemma.
Republican candidate for governor Heidi Ganahl said her plan to combat climate change is more fossil fuels from Colorado.
One of my goals is to get our oil and gas workers back to work because we produce the cleanest energy on the planet right here in Colorado. There is absolutely no reason for us to not produce the energy and instead go to Russia, Venezuela, Iran. That's insane. So that's one of my key initiatives, is to get our energy industry back to work.
Colorado's Democratic Governor Jared Polis obviously has made climate change and the environment a hallmark of his campaigns. Ganahl has not talked much about climate change and its impact on our state. And even today at the Colorado Water Congress, Ganahl spent a good bit of her time talking about crime. Aurora's latest campaign against people experiencing homelessness involves rocks, specifically sharp, jagged rocks. Conservative Councilwoman Danielle Jurinsky announced this plan on talk radio this morning, speaking with former DA and former 9 News legal analyst George Brockler.
We're looking at a lot of our intersections, especially by the highways and stuff, where we can just bring in rocks, big, sharp, jagged rocks.
Wow.
That's not going to be real comfortable to camp on. And, George, that helps with our water conservation. So. Yeah.
So that idea is technically called hostile architecture. We talked about it because you see it in Denver as well as in other cities where surfaces are sometimes made as uncomfortable as possible for sitting or laying on. The city of Aurora tells us the big, sharp, jagged rocks are part of a discussion they're having with CDOT on how to discourage people from trying to live on CDOT property. The city says nothing's final yet. Aurora City Council has recently instituted anti-homeless sweeps like Denver's, and last night the conservative majority on council passed a plan to put up signs telling people not to give money to panhandlers. The council's conservative majority told us that giving money to people asking for it on the streets fuels an unhealthy cycle. We asked if they had evidence of this, and they said they did not have research to back it up. Studies in Canada and California have found that when people have been given money, they tend to use it for basic needs. Tonight, the Douglas County School Board will decide whether to ask voters for more funding for better teacher pay. After a pretty divisive stretch in that county politically, the district's own polling has showed that fewer than 4 in 10 voters are supportive of the idea of more funding. New Superintendent Erin Kane did tell Next that she thinks that Doug Koch schools should go for it anyway. They should ask. The board tonight will vote on sending a nearly $60 million mill levy that would go to the November ballot. If the override passes, it would allow the school district to ask for more property tax revenue, which it would plan to use to give teachers and support staff a raise. When President Biden signed that so-called Inflation Reduction Act, it immediately changed which electric vehicles are eligible for federal tax credits. So Colorado, the state, has got a goal to have nearly 1 million EVs on the road by 2030. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger looks at whether this new federal law makes the state's goal easier or harder to meet.
Colorado drivers have not yet attached themselves to electric vehicles, but you can't fault the Colorado Energy Office for looking at the positive side of the battery.
About a 50% increase in the number of electric vehicles on the road in Colorado over the last year.
Transportation Fuels and Technology Director Christian Willis is not wrong. We've tracked EVs since Democratic Governor Jared Polis signed his first executive order, aiming for 940,000 EVs on the road by 2030. When he signed it at the start of 2019, there were between 15 and 17,000 EVs in Colorado. Today, 60,000. Federal tax credits of up to $7,500 have helped, but the Inflation Reduction Act signed by President Biden last week immediately changed which vehicles are eligible for the tax credit.
I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, even if there are some short-term hiccups with the way that the tax credit is structured.
Several electric or plug-in electric vehicles no longer qualify for the federal tax credit. Several others will soon. Tim Jackson with the Colorado Automobile Dealers Association tries to simply explain why.
The final assembly of the vehicle has to be within the North American Free Trade Area, so that's Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and as well as the battery components.
For instance, Hyundai and Kia electric models that qualified for a federal tax credit earlier this month no longer do, but certain Teslas, which did not, soon will. The new law took away a limit that stopped the tax credit after so many vehicles were sold. Teslas, even without the tax credit currently, are still the top EV bought in Colorado.
People are still buying those vehicles even though there isn't a federal tax credit.
There is still a $2,500 state tax credit for buying electric vehicles. That drops to $2,000 next year.
If the 940,000 unit goal is to be achieved, there will need to be more incentives. We're probably closer to hitting somewhere around 500,000 to 600,000.
Tim Jackson, who you just heard from, said to picture a hockey stick. I should have stopped in sports. I would have had a visual. Where we are with EVs and where we will be going. 86% of Colorado vehicles are light-duty trucks, pickups, vans, and SUVs. Ford is about to come out with an electric pickup, and that could pick up the pace for EVs on Colorado roads because Coloradans love themselves some pickups.
Yeah, absolutely. The Lightning's going to be super popular. Also popular, being cheap and not buying new cars. I've never bought a new car in my life, but now there's a used EV credit.
Yeah, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, you can get some tax credit on a used electric vehicle. If you bought one prior to this month, you would never have a tax credit. And again, it's so complicated. I'm going to put a few links on our website where you can go find people who are smarter than me that figured out which cars may qualify and which ones certainly won't qualify.
All right, Marshall, thank you. The guy from Castle Rock, accused of trying to keep border wall cash for himself, is trying to move his second trial closer to home. A big victory for people in a mobile home park. They own their homes, but not the land where they live.
This is a very unusual event.
A lake in one of Colorado's most beautiful spots is going green. It's something glaciers can do slowly. This happened overnight. Next. The guy from Castle Rock, accused of helping to raise millions of dollars to privately fund Trump's border wall and then keeping some of that cash himself, that man would like his second trial moved to Colorado. Timothy Shea is the last defendant standing in the We Build the Wall case. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon was pardoned. 2 other defendants pleaded guilty. Shea's first trial in New York ended back in June with a deadlocked jury. Shea's lawyer is arguing in new court filings he can't get a fair retrial in New York, so he wants it brought closer to home, said that would save Shea some money. This is not the first time that Shea's tried to get that trial moved to Colorado. Judge said no to it back in 2020. Neighbors at a mobile home park outside Gunnison are getting a reprieve from a huge rent hike. Their new landlord wanted to raise their rent by 70%. A judge has gotten involved to say not for now. Many of the people who live at the Ski Town Village Mobile Home Park in Gunnison County own their homes. They do not own the land underneath. Their new landlord tried to raise their rent by more than $300 earlier this year. That's an increase that the residents say would put a number of them on the verge of being homeless. The residents sued over this, and last week a judge agreed to a preliminary injunction stopping the rent increase.
This was just a huge victory for the residents. They were really in a situation where without a preliminary injunction, many of them might have been displaced and had to lose their homes while they waited for this case to get to trial.
The lawyers for the residents say this kind of ruling protecting tenants does not happen often in our state. They're basing their case off of the state's Mobile Home Park Act. It's been in place for decades, but hasn't often been used in court.
A snapshot of the month of August showing the first 2 weeks sizzling hot, temperatures soaring into the 90s, triple digits. Past week or so below average, a nice change of pace. And today, right smack dab at average at 87 out of DIA. Some 90s into northern Colorado, 70s up into the high country, and still pretty toasty out to the west. I am tracking a few darker skies, kind of pushing in into Larimer County. Some stronger thunderstorms also out there through Grand County, where we do have a few flash flood warnings in place. You'll notice not a lot of rain around them, as all that rain has already pushed through, so those should expire within the next 30 minutes to an hour. Futurecast kicking out all the storms tonight, and by early tomorrow morning, the sunshine is back for us. Isolated storms once again possible up into the high country, then everything really clearing out tomorrow. This ridge of high pressure just continues to sneak in closer and closer to Colorado, so that's going to allow our temperatures to warm back up, back to the upper 80s, lower 90s. Here we go, with some 60s and 70s up in the mountains. Our best chance for storms looks to be Friday, and right now I have the 90s, returning just in time for the weekend.
Hikers expected to find clear blue water. Instead, the lake is like this milky green. Apparently, this is something that happens in the Alps. And the missing cat, the one with the surprisingly large fan base all over Colorado, headed home. That's next. A lake in Rocky Mountain National Park changed colors. Apparently, this is because of a rock slide. This is what Lake Hayaha looks like right now. Its usual blue has turned like a turquoise, kind of a milky green. The park's head of resource stewardship says it was a massive rock slide through Chaos Canyon at the end of June. Kicked up a lot of what the experts call glacial flour. So basically, it's silt and clay that's been crushed down to almost like a flour-like substance. Glaciers can make that slowly, but big rock slides speed up the process.
The churning of the rocks and just the transport that happened during the debris slide brought this material in. It changed, the composition of the water column and just how the light is being reflected to our eyes.
Cora Neidick with the park says this kind of lake color you'll typically see more in the Alps, where you have glaciers slowly chewing up rocks. The rock slide in Rocky Mountain National Park is still sliding in spots, which means more glacial flour headed down to the lake. Neidick thinks it could keep that green color for a little while. One of your favorite stories from while I was away has a wonderful conclusion. The beloved shop cat who was snatched during his morning stroll last week is now headed home. Yesterday, we told you about Morris, the most popular employee at the Country Ace Hardware in Granby. A whole lot of you reached out to us, say you love seeing Morris by the checkout aisle whenever you're in there. So last week, Morris is chilling in the parking lot. Somebody picks him up, drives away. The Grand County Sheriff's Office now says the people who grabbed the cat thought he was a stray. I want to give him a good home. He's not a stray. After a week's vacation in Denver, a sergeant has picked up the relocated cat and driven him back to Granby. So look for Morris at the Ace Hardware soon. Did I miss your feedback while I was away? Some of it. That's next. Whole bunch of feedback tonight about Republican gubernatorial candidate Heidi Ganahl's plan to address climate change. She told the Colorado Water Congress today that the way that we ought to tackle climate change is by producing more fossil fuels in Colorado. Jesse writes, my plan to address being overweight is to eat more ice cream. Philip notes that what Ganahl outlined there is a plan. Phil says not a great one, not a climate change solution one, but it is a plan. Larry notes, Marshall Zellinger and I were talking about electric vehicles, and Larry said that the Ford electric truck is out. They just don't have the supplies to build as many as there's demand for. Dan told us he was looking at a 6-month to 1-year wait. Marshall heard the same. A lot of demand for EVs here in Colorado. Have a good night.